Okay, let's call the meeting to order. May I ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to the second item, the approval of the agenda. Does everybody approve the agenda, or would anybody like anything added? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Okay, I'm going to need to see who,
Sorry.
who moves
Okay.
in seconds because I'm not facing the camera.
Sorry, who'd like to move that? Moved by Brian, seconded by Jared. All in favor? Against? So Christian, I noticed you didn't vote on that. Is that an abstention?
I have the public agenda, so if we're just voting on the public agenda, I can vote on that.
Great, thank you. Adoption of the minutes. Are there any additions or omissions or changes? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes. Moved by Brian, seconded by Christian. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Communications. Number 1, A1. Memorandum about firearms training, requiring it to be done within 2 years instead of 1 because of COVID. Any comments on that?
We've been able to requalify everybody this year. So this spring, so everyone's requalified as of 2020. So it works for us.
Great. Number 2, Public Safety Division Memorandum, Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act in relation to cannabis retail delivery. Apparently they can do it, but they can't hire a third person to do it. Any other comments on that?
I'm sorry, I was just with Andrea here. She's still not working on the link here. I'm going to just ask her to dial in. Hold on a second here. And Donna, she was asking whether you could send the link again.
Yeah, I'm going to email the thing again. I just invited her again, so maybe it'll work this time. Well, while we're waiting, we should probably have a motion to just receive the communications.
May I ask for a motion to receive the communications? Moved by Christian, seconded by Jared. All in favor? Passed unanimously.
Just a second. All right.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
here.
there she is.
Yay!
Had some technical difficulties, but I'm here.
I'll
Amazing.
pass the chair back to you, or to you. And just to note that we are on section 4A2.
Thank you, Jeff. Oh my God. Okay, let me figure out where I am. 4A2. Are you just starting 4A2?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. All right, so these are communications in from the Ministry of Public Safety. First one, letting us know that licensed cannabis retail stores are allowing customers to pick up outside their store like other retail establishments. Is there anything else you need to know about that, Angie?
No, it was just because of the fact that it was one of the stores that was non-essential, and then so they made it an emergency order allowing them to have that curbside pickup. And then the The AGCO is still looking after standards in requirements that they have under their own standards, and they'll be looking after the enforcement of that side of things.
Okay, great. And then there's a whole bunch of information attached to that memo. And then we get to the next memo, which is reporting on the enforcement of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. So we're being asked to provide the ministry with our enforcement data.
That's correct. And Jody Armstrong is our link to that. And so every Tuesday by 1 o'clock, he sends in the report to update them on what's happening. And basically it's recording the different types of investigations that's happened and tracking them. We also get those on a weekly basis, so he sends them to us as well. And as of the 18th of May, I can say that we've had 285 calls for service with respect to COVID-19, and that's since the beginning when this all started. 48% of them, the majority of them, are about complaints about social gatherings, so having too many people together. The other majority, are 27%, are complaints about the workforce, the workplace, how they're operating, kind of thing. I can say that 24% of the cases, there have been warnings given. They've been unfounded in 42% of the time. And so we have not laid any charges. So we're really proactively doing the communications and speaking with people about things. So the general consensus is that people are very much abiding by the rules and regulations.
Okay, that's good to know. I think we're lucky in our community. Maybe lucky isn't the right word, but we've had really good leadership. Kieran Moore has provided great leadership. Brian, you've provided great leadership. And I think the whole community understands what has to be done and why it's necessary. And so it's nice to see that our compliance rate is good. All right, next we have a memo about, again, we're talking about license plates and license plate stickers, and this is an extension of validity for accessible parking permits. So along the same lines of what we talked about last month.
I think the next one's about actually the portal, COVID-19 risk portal.
You could be right. Oh, yes, you are right. Sorry, I skipped that one. Okay, talk to us about the portal.
So, so this portal is only accessible by communications staff or people that are, dispatching. And it was authorized under of course, the EMCPA, specifically for information that could be checked for purposes of frontline policing so that they can make informed decisions about whether to take additional precautions with respect to PPEs when they're attending calls for service. And these portals just contain COVID positive information. So I can say that we've been using it since April the 22nd. We don't use it that often. It's not frequently used, but I think that it's helpful. It's a tool for us, but I think the idea is really that people should also expect our officers frontline can use the self-assessment questionnaires at the scene as well to help determine whether they should be using PPEs, because this tool may have information that may not have information about something that's out there. So you need to use your own skill set in terms of the self-assessment questions while you're on scene. So I think one of the things are just to assume that you're going into a scene that could potentially be contaminated, and then just make sure you're wearing your PPEs if the actions and what you see dictate for you. So, but again, it's a tool. We're very mindful of the privacy issues. It's nothing's recorded. We don't put anything into the CAD system or our RMS. It's strictly verbal over the air, encrypted, so that nobody else has access to what we're saying.
Okay, thank you. So then the next one is extending the validity period for accessible parking permits. That one's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. Is there anything that you needed me to comment on this?
I don't think so. If it follows the other ones we have seen around the Val stickers and everything else.
That's right. It's basically anything they've given some leniency to the expiry dates during this emergency period.
Okay. The next memo in from the public safety talks about testing. So you've heard the premier say that he wants more testing. And this memo is about prioritizing testing where we don't have enough equipment or tests, perhaps, to do everybody. And so there are certain individuals like healthcare workers, frontline healthcare workers who have priority. And this makes it clear that first responders, including police, also have priority in those situations.
Yeah, and basically it's saying that they should be tested as soon as is feasible if they develop any symptom compatible with COVID-19. And so they would get the priority, so that you will be tested. So as you mentioned, it's vulnerable populations, it's healthcare workers, caregivers, first responders that this goes to. And really the testing is very quick. Test results come back very quickly in our area. And that's good to satisfy the peace of mind for all workers and their families.
Yeah. Right, the next memo is just clarifying closure of outdoor recreational amenities. I think there have been some changes since this memo, but anyway, it says that when outdoor amenities, so the closure of those outdoor spaces wasn't necessarily the space itself. So you could walk through it, you could walk your dog through it, you could do those types of things. You just couldn't use any play structures or anything else that was in place. And I know in our local parks, the playgrounds are fenced off, any designated like a sand pit for kids to play, those are all fenced off as well.
This one was paying some attention to extrapolate that onto amenities located on beaches now that you know the season's getting warmer, to remind people the same thing is occurring there.
Okay, next is letting us know that there's been a 90-day extension granted to security guards, private investigators, agencies, and those types of employees who do that work. If their registration was going to expire between the middle of March and the middle of June, that it's been extended out as a result of COVID.
Yeah, and then the only other thing is that there's still parameters that they are required to fulfill, such as ensuring that they have a criminal record check, and that they're complying with that peace of mind, and that's helpful, especially with respect to security guards. You know, where there's a bit of a shortage initially. In terms of who could be, you know, addressing whether it was outside of the different centers that we have where there's testing. There was a lot of security guards in the hospitals and so on, and I think there was a shortage, and this really helps alleviate these shortages.
Okay. The next memo in is about Police Week, which was last week, I think. How did Police Week go?
Well, I think it went really well. It was digital, of course. Chris is overseeing that area, of course, Jody and Steve Koopman, and they put a lot of things out on social media starting from the Sunday and on, highlighting not only our civilians, but our frontline special constables, communicators, our volunteers, all those kinds of things. And actually, I don't know whether we can do this, but we did save one. We put one that we could maybe share with you so that you could see it. So we'll see how technically savvy we are with respect to this. So Donna's going to try and see if we can share this with everybody.
Yeah, I will try to do that.
And when you say share with everybody, do you mean just the board, or are you going to put it up on the website? Oh,
right now.
Here it is right now.
Yep.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
Just hit play.
Kingston's police service, which has had the privilege of serving its community since 1841 and therefore is one of the oldest municipal police services in Canada. The 1841 mission of our police service was to ensure the preservation of good order and the public morals therein. That purpose is still expected, but policing has never been as complex as it is now, and it will continue to grow in complexity in the future. The way forward is about collaboration and innovation. In other words, a culture of accepting diversity of thought. It's a holistic community approach, one that requires police working with their community partners to understand the root causes of problems and then addressing them. We have a strong and committed leadership team and a complement of dedicated sworn and civilian members who are honored to serve in such a historic and vibrant city. We are also extremely fortunate to have engaged citizens who are very supportive of the Kingston Police, as well as strong community partnerships to assist us in our objectives.
That looks great.
So there was, throughout each day, Monday through to Saturday, we had that. And we also had some safety, traffic safety tips that went through that as well, because it was also the CACP traffic week as well. So it was good.
Nice. Are you going to put that on the website?
I think that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, you should. It's a nice video.
Yeah, and there's 5 of them. So I think that's important to do for all of them. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Next from the Public Safety Division, price gouging. So this is an order prohibiting price gouging, and it talks about your ability to enforce the order to prevent price gouging.
And again, Staff Sergeant Jody Armstrong is looking after this on our behalf. And so complaints can be received to the government online portal, and it's reviewed by the ministry there, and then referred to the, after screening it, referred to the police service of jurisdiction, or people can actually make complaints to our own police service. And we haven't had anything at this point in time that would fit that bill, but it really talks about how to enforce this, the kind of evidence that you would need, and of course to really do a measured approach when you're looking at this.
Okay. Next talks about trucking. So I had to read it a few times because I'm not really familiar with trucking. But I guess the US granted a waiver for commercial vehicles. So again, it's about pushing out expiration of different permits and everything else. US government issued a waiver, which our Ministry of Transportation recognizes. And then the provincial government is relaxing load restrictions for certain products that are deemed to be essential or necessary in relation to the COVID-19 crisis. That's what I got out of that.
I think that's a good explanation, and really it's to allow the supply chain to keep continuing on through the country as we're going through this COVID pandemic. So exactly that. It just allows the relaxation of the driver's license that expire after March 20th through to June 30th. And then it relaxes the load restrictions for certain types of supplies, being medical supplies, equipment necessary for community safety, paper products, raw materials, fuel, agribusinesses to support food, farm products, those kinds of things. And that includes our area too. So we're listed in this area where these are relaxed loads are being permitted.
Okay. Next memo talks about changes to the Victim Quick Response Program necessitated by the COVID crisis, including allowing victims or survivors an increased allowance for temporary accommodation and meal benefits, and just reminding everybody that these services are still in place, albeit being delivered through different methods, including electronic methods.
That's correct, and I think that's absolutely it. It's to ensure that victims of crime have access to safe living arrangements and can comply with the distancing and self-isolation that's required.
Okay. Next memo is a guidance note talking about the role of a safety officer in the whole incident management system. So I read it because we've dealt with incident management systems before. And so I was interested in seeing how they are tweaking this new note as comparison to the last note. But Angie, do you have any comments about this?
Yeah, so it's replacing actually an advisory. So before it's an advisory, now it's just turned into a guidance note. So it's very much the same thing under the incident, the IMS incident management system, which we're all part of. And really it highlights the role of the safety officer, so that when you have large incidents, you could have just a police specific incident, or you could have a multi-jurisdictional incident. But when these things are activated, the EOC is activated, it makes sure that you pay attention to the fact that you designate a safety officer, which really looks after the best interests and protection of the workers that are on the ground, to make sure that any health and safety issues are looked after and addressed and are brought up through incident command, so that there's always that top of mind looking after that part of it, so that the PPEs are there, whatever else it might be, that there's a link from the ground to the worker to the incident commander.
And we have all of that in place. We have our safety officers designated and.
Yeah, and the safety officer really can be a person, it could be a sergeant, it could be it's basically a competent person that has the knowledge and the skills that looks at that. I mean, we've got people on our health and safety committee. I mean, they understand these things, so do all our members as well. But it's really a competent person that puts their mind to the PPEs. We also have designated persons who are infectious disease specialists as well. So we've got a variety of people that have different specialties. And that's what this is really highlighting, that we need to pay attention to this.
Okay. Next is requirement for annual reporting. This is around designations. So Angie, can you talk to us about this one?
So this is with respect to times. This is a ministry appointment of not only a senior official within an organization, which in our organization, Inspector Dan Maston, and it's with respect to designating public officers. And we have a number of officers that are designated as such. And really what it does is it allows for, under certain circumstances, when a criminal activity occurs, is allowed to happen through policing to further an investigation. And it's really a documented process where this happens. When a senior official allows a public officer within the organization or to do this, then we have to write a report, make sure it's completely written up, and then we forwarded that on. So it's a really very well tightly controlled, and every year we have to report on this to the ministry. And at this point in time, we have zero reports. It doesn't happen very often within our organization at all. But this is something that is available for other organizations as well, not just Kingston Police.
Okay. So I think for the newer board members, this is the first time that we've come across designations. Do you guys have any questions about that? Okay. Next is crime guns. So just letting us know that when we seize guns, I guess, that information needs to be forwarded directly to the Firearms Tracing and Enforcement Program.
Yeah, so to trace, and that's really, so this allows the types of guns that are forwarded there are crime guns, and the definition would be those that have been used in a criminal offense, they've been obtained, possessed, or intended to be used to facilitate criminal activity, if they have removed serial numbers, and if they've just been found weapons, or it includes any weapon that's been adapted to be used as a firearm. And this is submitted to the firearms tracing, so that we can determine where they've come from, and it helps in determining trends, and it's provincially mandated that we all do that. That's over and above reporting all our firearms that we do annually to the ministry. On top of that, this is a separate system where we're actually, all crime guns are sent through there, so that it's we get some overall intelligence gathering as well, and determining where they're coming from.
Okay,
And it's through CISO, so the Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario.
okay. Next memo is letting us know that the deadline for completion of the community safety and well-being plan is being pushed out, but the ministry doesn't know the deadline that they're going to land on. They need to do some consulting first. So they're going to be consulting with AMO as well as the City of Toronto to figure out what would be a reasonable new deadline for the completion of these plans.
Yeah, it was due January 1st, 2021. So we'll see. It's just pushed back a little bit further. We were making good headway on it within our community, and so we'll wait and see what kind of a deadline they have. I'm sure we can resume this at some point in time through Zoom meetings as well.
Okay. Next, updates on the approach to prosecutions under the Provincial Offences Act for charges laid alleging violation of the emergency orders. Angie?
Yeah, basically this is just a chart that sort of talks about whose jurisdiction does it fall under when charges are laid. So, for example, for us, police officers and First Nations constables, if we're laying a charge under the Part 1 of the PAO, Provincial Offences Act, then it falls under the municipalities pursuant to the transfer agreement with MEG. So that we would have our prosecutor here in the municipality do so. But if it was a Part 3 under the Provincial Offences Act that was laid, then it would fall under the MEG Criminal Law Division. They would be prosecuting it. So it just kind of highlights whose jurisdiction it falls into within our community when they are prosecuted.
Right. Okay. Next is letting us know about the assault style firearm ban that went into effect on May 1st. You probably read about that in the news. There is a 2-year transition period, so a bit of a amnesty period, maybe. That's how I'm describing it. I'm not sure if that's actually accurate, but a 2-year transition period. And then these assault style weapons cannot be used, sold, imported, transported.
That's right. That's right. This, as you talked about, the 2-year amnesty period under the criminal code is in effect until April the 30th, 2022. There's more things that are going to have to be rolled out. I know that they're looking at a buyback program as well to buy back some of these. So there's more information, obviously, that's going to be coming forward on this whole proposal. And I just know that there are some groups that are launching challenges against this weapons ban to clarify the rules and so forth. So it is something that it's there, and we'll wait and see what happens in terms of how it all rolls out.
Okay. Next, an updated COVID-19 screening guidance document. So as I'm sure you're aware, the criteria used for screening have evolved a little bit since the beginning of this to now, and they are continuing to evolve. So this is just providing us with the updated criteria as of the beginning of May.
Yeah, and the list of symptoms is a lot longer than it was there to begin with, really. So, and it talks about dispatch questions for long-term care or retirement homes, but then it also, once you're past that, it also has regular screening questions that can be asked. So really just updates the list. It's quite lengthy.
Next is a case management plan that's been put forward from the Office of the Chief Coroner. This would be in the event that the COVID pandemic hits very, very hard. And so the Chief Coroner is involved. Hopefully we don't get there. When I read this, it sounds like New York City to me, but the coroner is just letting us know that if we get there, this is the plan.
Yes, and Inspector Rice has worked very closely with our own coroners here, and has very early on put out a plan to how we respond to sudden deaths. In terms of when certain things happen, how long we should wait before we go in, if there's been an intubation, those kinds of things, but worked out the details very, very closely to protect everybody, all members of the health team that are going in, or the first responders that are going in. So this clarifies it as well through the all chiefs here.
Okay. Next memo is just confirming, so this is around the license plates. So just confirming that both the old white version and the new blue version are still valid. I think we got that last time around, but I guess there was some confusion.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. They're both valid.
Yeah. All right, now we're getting some information in from the CAPG. They've extended the deadline for nominations for the Emile Kolb Award, resolutions, and yeah, nominations and resolutions. Got it both. So if anybody has nominations or resolutions to put forward, turn your mind to that. Next, one. We have, so remember last month there was an issue around who would be on the zone board. And so we have an email in from Zone 2 letting us know who will be on that board. A lot of familiar names, which is nice. The OAPSB AGM is going to be virtual Friday, May 29th. So that's next Friday. I encourage anyone who has the time to attend. I've gone to the OAPSB annual general meeting in the past when it was in person, and it was really nice to talk to other board members. There's a good exchange of information, maybe a little bit more difficult to do virtually, but if you have the time, it would still be worthwhile. The next is an email just talking about the community safety and well-being plans. I guess there was a reach out from Tay Valley asking about the deadline, but we already know that it has been extended. We just don't know extended to when. And the next email is talking about the Zone 2 meetings. So as I read it, the rest of the meetings are canceled for the balance of the year. For next year, they're thinking of meeting twice, once in mid-June and the second in mid-September. I think that they're still thinking through this, trying to find the appropriate balance between making sure that everybody has information and that there's an exchange of ideas, but also being able to do it in a way that keeps everybody safe. So I think it's a work in progress. We have at least one report. So we have our financial report. Angie, are you going to speak to this?
I think John Howe's on the line to be able to speak to it.
Oh, hi, John. Where are you? Oh, there you are.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, this is the report for the first 3 months, and it's a little bit tardy. The last month's meeting was just a little bit early. The books weren't closed yet, so I do apologize, but this is for the first 3 months, and you can see we did run a deficit of $143,000 at the end of March. Just quickly, if we go through there, because I know you all have the report, we looked at revenues. The 3-month actual was $472,000 against the budget of $1.1 million. We were below budget by $638,000. That primarily was all the grant revenue. At that point in time, we had not received any of our grant revenue yet from the province. We've since received the trailing payment of last year's PEM grant for around $180,000. Still haven't received the prison transportation grant yet. That payment, they come in quarterly, but that was primarily that item. But I should point out, and we put it in the notes there, the 2 grants that we had budgeted for, we had done the budget before the grant approvals had come through, and we budgeted at last year's amounts. And 2 grants came in less than we budgeted. the PEM grant was reduced by 25%. That grant, we budgeted the same amount as previous years, and it's been the same amount for as long as I've been here. So we were surprised by that, but that reduced the amount of that grant by $238,000. And on the prisoner transportation grant, each year the province allocates that around, and it came in less than we had hoped for as well, by 8.75% or $130,000 less. And that was approved after we had done our budget, unfortunately. So in terms of alarm licensing, it was a little bit favorable by 10,000. Paid duty was down, but with everything going on, not surprised there, but we don't have the expense on the other side. The revenue on the background checks is down by 47,000 unfavorable after 3 months. The background checks revenue has really disappeared as with the pandemic. Any questions on revenues? If we're good. In terms of operating expenses, for the 3 months ending March 31st, we were at $10,547,000 against a budget of $11,042,000. So we were favorable by $494,000. The big item there, salaries and wages provide a favorable variance of $230,000. Overtime was only unfavorable by $2,000, which is good. In fact, I can report to the end of April, we're actually favorable on overtime, which is good, slightly by about $18,000. Base wages were favorable by $335,000. We do have a number of vacancies right now in the sworn complement as well as the civilian complement. Part-time wages were unfavorable by $24,000. We are using some part-time people to fill in for some of those vacancies. Fringe benefits were unfavorable by $87,000. That's expected because the load on those expenses are in the first part of the year, and that should turn the other way as we go through the year, as in past years. And of course, paid duty was favorable by $8,000. Supplies and materials were favorable by $265,000. And really that's the time of expenses. A few items of note: fuel was favorable by $30,000, obviously with the reduced price. Education and training line was favorable by $56,000. A lot of the courses were canceled that we normally go to. And travel is favorable by $13,000. People just aren't traveling with the pandemic. And investigative services was favorable by $69,000. We hadn't started any new projects at that point in time. As we go through that, we were asked to do a forecast where we thought we'd be this year. And we have shown you there the details of that. I think it was reported $350,000 deficit. When we looked at asked to do a forecast this early in the year, we did go through the budget line by line, looking to see where any impacts might be. We know we've got the problem with the reduced provincial grants of $368,000. The horse funding shortfall, we said the horse was going to cost us $47,000. It's not in the budget. There was going to be some fundraising done. We did raise $5,000, but now's not a good time to fundraise. So we are short $42,000 there. So I included that as a negative. We had hoped to cover off those deficits with our hiring practices. We do have a number of people that have retired, and we're going to hire fourth class. And we do have a couple of civilian vacancies, one's being deferred. All that together, we thought we could save $304,000 to offset those grant revenues that didn't materialize. But we really hadn't expected the pandemic. We've spent $87,000 on personal PPE supplies, which was not budgeted. We have had some savings on expenses, primarily fuel and travel, as I had mentioned before, and we've forecasted out maybe $143,000. Who knows where fuel is going to be as we go through the year, but we suggested there'd be savings there. We do have lost revenues. We knew we were down $47,000 on the background checks after 3 months. We've suggested we'll have another $200,000 decrease in that revenue line as we go along. Typically, we budget $650,000 for that. So we've taken out 38%. Where that's going to be, I don't know, but at this point, it was our best guess. We've also had a couple of secondments that we had that those officers have been called back. So that revenue as well has disappeared. So total lost revenues was $303,000. So the pandemic impact was $247,000 deficit, primarily because of the lost revenues. So net was around $350,000. We were suggesting that we had a negative impact this year as we go forward. Now, there's a lot of unknowns as we go forward, whether we can make some of that up or not, I don't know. But as the year unfolds, we'll obviously have a better sense of where we're going on some of those budget lines. Any questions on that?
Christian, go ahead.
So can you expand on the cost of the horse, and can the chief please expand on the law enforcement and prevention value of the horse for a municipality the size of Kingston? Most municipalities our size do not afford themselves the luxury of a horse. And it also seems that the horse was, the costs were going to be offset much more substantially than they actually are. And so I'm wondering whether there may be an important discussion to be had about whether this is a luxury that the city can and should be affording, and the functional utility for law enforcement purposes.
Angie, did you want to take that?
Yep. Well, as you know, when we had our budget, we did not include the horse in our budget, and it was really through fundraising that this allowed us to go ahead with it. So it's unfortunate. Obviously, the pandemic is limiting fundraising for everyone throughout our community, and our emphasis is on looking at COVID and looking after our most vulnerable people and ensuring that no one's left behind and that our community is looked after. So that's the first and foremost what's happening on that. So yes, discussions will have to be had, how we look at the global deficit that we're having, and that's exactly where we're going ahead with this and having those discussions.
Can we get a timeline on those discussions? Because I think this is I mean, it's a significant expenditure that taxpayers are now being saddled with here. And so I think there may need to be greater accountability to the taxpayer, that the taxpayer is now assuming a cost that was never intended to be assumed by the ratepayers. And so I think we need a more aggressive justification of the value of the horse, or maybe we need to have a conversation about whether this is the time perhaps for Kingston Police to dispose of certain types of luxuries that we seem to afford ourselves that other cities our size are not.
Absolutely. I've had begun those discussions already with our Deb and Brad Wickham. I had conversations there, and I have begun discussions also with our mounted unit rider, Constable Sarah Grunewagen. So we've had those discussions on where we're going to go with this. I mean, today we're presenting it for the first time. We've just sort of, and the beginning, sort of mid stages of the pandemic, and obviously the whole deficit and where we're projecting, it's very fluid on what things are happening. So the discussions are live. I'm not immune to, I acknowledge what you're saying. So it's already on the plans to have these discussions. What is that going to look like? So I'm not lost to that. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. Maybe we can also make this an agenda item again for the next meeting, so we can get an update on the running expenses incurred to the taxpayer as a result.
Jared?
Question for John.
Yes.
John, since being with the police force and doing the budgets, have you ever seen a deficit like this before through different circumstances? And what was the plan to get out of that? Meaning, is there a future focus to bring that number better? And like, what would some of the things that we could do to do that?
Okay, no, in past years, in the 10, 11 years I've been here, we've never faced a deficit situation in the past. We've been able to manage it. Our budget surpluses the last few years have only been $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. So we have been quite tight on the whole budgeting process. We've never built much fluff in it, if you will. But again, this year, the government grants, that one it used to be the CPP 1,000 officer grant, that was always reliable. And when that was reduced 25% after we did the budget, that was a hit. And again, we thought we could cover it off with our hiring practices by deferring a couple of a civilian position and by hiring fourth class. but then as the deficit came along, the big problem is the reduction in the revenues on the background checks. Normally 650,000. A lot of the years I've always reported, yeah, we're running a bit favorable on that, but that's just disappeared. And we are suggesting we took 247,000 of that out. Will that come back in the last half of the year? I don't know. We looked at the various expense lines, and we are having some discussions to manage it going forward. For example, the maintenance we do here on the building and equipment, is there some of that can be deferred, or some of it that we can avoid this year? We're still looking. There's always a lot of unknowns too. Investigative services, what projects are we going to undertake? What opportunities are there on that line? But I always caution too, we could have a major event or two between now and the end of the year, and things could turn the other way on us as well. We did suggest we'd be favorable on fuel by 100 and just over 100,000, 117,000, because consumption is down and the price is down. But I see fuel's going back up. So how much we can save on that, I don't know. Some of the other lines, we're always going to be looking. Education and training we looked at. There are some courses scheduled in the last half of the year. We don't know what's going to open with the police college. We might be able to save some money there as well. Travel, still not a lot going on. Maybe there's some more opportunities on those lines. This was our best guess at this point in time, but could we find some more savings? We are continuing to look for savings, continue to look for opportunities to bring that down. I just didn't feel comfortable saying we could cover it all right now, because there's a lot of things that are going to happen between now and the end of the year. So does that make sense? And
yeah, it does. And yeah, and I understand you don't have a crystal ball. So what happens, just from my knowledge, at the end of the year if there's a 700,000 deficit? Where does that go, and how is that applied for the police force?
We would have to go back to council with that information. Right now, we were asked for a forecast, so this was the heads up that, look, we've got some issues on some grant lines, we've got some issue on some revenue lines. We identified some savings. It's like everything else around the city. This pandemic is causing quite a bit of chaos in a lot of different areas, and this is hurting us.
Certainly, in terms of where we could look for other areas. I mean, we are monitoring things and not replacing some of our retirements too, and so some cost savings may be had in those areas as we're moving down. I know that some of the programs that we've had in the summertime, we were hiring summer students through the YIPI program. Although we do get some funding for that, we are canceling those programs because really there isn't anything during the pandemic for that to do. We're shifting some of the job duties from officers who would normally be doing different types of work. Now we're shifting the job duties. For example, our special constables, who are not only doing prisoner transport, but we're also having them assigned other jobs, such as working, helping us with the emergency management, looking at the enforcement and education ends of things there. So we're really obviously trying to hold our full-time jobs and having all the work that's necessary to go along with that, and with the additional duties that come along with the pandemic. Because as much as we still have to have a business a function here, crime does not stop. We have different types of crimes that we are experiencing. As a result of this, we're having a much more an increase in our disturbance calls. We're looking at disturbance calls. We're looking at medical assist calls, check welfare calls. We're still having all the regular types of calls in terms of domestics and frauds and so forth. Mental health calls we're having as well. Some of them are much more protracted than they have been in the past. We're seeing, some more activity, some more whether it's violent activity in terms of people that are having some crisis that we're seeing. So, the fact is that crime does not stop, or looking after our population does not stop. We still have things that we have to do here. So we're also mindful of that and having that delicate balance of our staffing levels.
If I could just add as well there, as things evolve, I know in April we did reduce our part-time hours, and We probably saved $10,000 there, which isn't in the forecast. That's good. But today the city advised us that US purchases are going to come in instead of at they used to come in when we bought US 1.35, it's going to be 1.42. So anything we buy from multinational corporations, it's often based on pricing in US dollars. So that will hurt us in the balance of the year as well. So a little bit good, we saved some more, but then I've got things slipping back with this US dollar. So a lot of things up in the air as we go through this year, for sure.
Brian, did you want to say something?
Yes, thanks, Andrea. So I think just to build on the questions so far, question to John and to Angie, you've talked about the uncertainty and the challenge in being able to project exactly, where we think we're going to be by the end of December. Like you said, so many things are changing. I'm wondering if you're looking at a phased approach to this. So as a city, even last night, we had a discussion about how we were going to manage our deficit to the end of August. And we did that because we have a greater level of certainty about where we think we are financially, at least for the next few months. Try to come up with some strategies that would address that deficit. And then then what we'll do is we'll do a second phase, look where we're at financially in the fall. Is that something that you're thinking of doing, that this a same approach here at police?
I agree with you too, because we're looking at sort of, or even we're sitting down with IT and our capital and how we're going to be able to, what things can we actually defer going on to the next few years. So that's one of the strategies that we've employed as well, knowing that even the NG911, all those things have been deferred now beyond the next year. So those are costs that we can now push forward that aren't going to impact our budget at this point in time. So those are all good strategies. I watched last night as those discussions happened with City Council. So those are the phased approaches are important. Our first approach, we saw we have 143,000 in our terms of our deficit, and how can we go from there? What does August look like? I know we're still keeping our healthy deployment of our shifts at least till the end of June, if not a little bit further, because we're still kind of waiting to see what that second phase or second wave may or may not look like. So we want to make sure that we don't change our shifts too soon. And so that'll at least carry to the end of June, maybe even longer than that, July, depending on, again, what we're hearing from Dr. Moore and yourselves, and where else can we have some savings, because that is, I mean, there's shifts in jobs. Once the courts, they're still open, so we still need to do court security, but our prisoner transport, we're still doing that, but we're doing it in a different way. We're having our special constables now, instead of all of them deployed at the courts, now some of them are actually just working with the shifts and deployed, bringing accused persons in with the prisoner transport van, rather than the actual cruisers to save on contaminations and so forth. So we're really trying to shift and cut down the amount of part-timers that we're doing. Unfortunately, the part-time hours are what's going to be decreasing, allowing for the full-timers to still be here.
Jared?
I believe it was 140,000, whatever, over $100,000 of the PPE that's been provided to our first responders or for the police force. How many months of supply is that? Like, will there be in August another $100 and some thousand purchase?
We try and keep a 3-month supply ahead of time. So that's where we are right now. We're trying to be 3 to 5 months, but I think we're around a 3-month supply ahead of time, so that we know we've got at least that much for us.
Thank you.
And we had forecasted about 87,000. We had actually spent 47,000. I've got the receipts here, and we forecasted another 40,000 between now and the end of the year. So we did forecast out for the whole till the end of the year.
Angie, can I just raise something in connection with the horse? I mean, in the past, I've always thought of the horse as being a bit of an ambassador, and the horse is there for public relations, and we know that the community loves the horse. But what I'm wondering is, might the horse, and I don't know the answer to this, I'm just raising it as a question, might the horse be a safer way of policing downtown during this COVID crisis, because the officer riding the horse is up above everybody else. And I don't know, but it's something that I would be interested in knowing before we make a decision about the horse, because we're all needing to do things, deliver services in a different way. And I wouldn't want to make a decision that actually negatively impacts our ability to provide a safer type of policing.
Yeah. And I think where you're going, especially with the pandemic, and we're looking at social distancing and education and so forth, the horse is ideal in terms of trails and all the public spaces that we have open to us. And it's a non-threatening way of going through and doing some enforcement, education, whatever that might look like through there. So those are ideas certainly that that are good in terms of that. Again, what was brought forward is really just the cost. You know, is the cost worth it? But really, what is your return on investment when you're actually using them? And like I say, all the larger departments all have them, you know, in terms of Toronto and Hamilton. I recognize that we are a smaller department. We do have the horse still. It's unfortunate we did not predict the pandemic, obviously, and fundraising is not just hitting Kingston Police, it's hitting everybody within our community in terms of how they're fundraising and raising funds. So you're right. It is looking at that, and those are conversations to have with Brad and Deb and Sarah. In terms of it may be that there's some training that we don't necessarily have to do as much in terms of the training part of things. They're not going to be going to any competition, obviously, in any of those kinds of things. So there's some savings to be had in those areas too, which is where we're sort of talking about how can things be cut down in terms of the amount of money that this may cost us. And as you said, an alternative delivery.
Jared?
The grants that that we didn't get this year, and it was a surprise to John. I guess this question is for John. So John, did they explain to you as to why we didn't get those grants? And moving forward, is it assumed that we will no longer be getting those grants because it's a fair chunk of operational monies? And is it something that we have to really look at in changing certain things to be able to compensate for those grants not coming?
The one grant was the old CPP 1,000 officers grant, was around 950,000. We've received that for many, many years. A number of police forces across the province received that. A lot of the smaller ones did not. When the Ontario government this year came forward, and the agencies that had been receiving that grant were all reduced 25%, except Toronto and Ottawa. They were able to maintain the full level of those grants. And then the difference money, my understanding was they took that other money and distributed it amongst other police forces, but that was a change in their philosophy. Again, that one was quite a surprise because we had it for, ever since I've been here, the same amount every year. And losing over $200,000 is quite a hit. The other grant, the Prison Transportation Grant, that's recalculated every year. And over the last number of years, our allocation has steadily gone up. Other agencies, other years have seen theirs go down. What the province does, they allocate $150,000 for prison transportation across the whole province. And each year we all do a survey as to what our actual costs are. And then my understanding is the province takes that 150 million, rather, I should say 150 million, and they distribute it across the province based on where everybody's money's being spent. And obviously other agencies got more money, we got less. Proportionally of the 150 million they make available. Now they've not, my understanding is they've not changed the 150 million for a number of years. So that one, other years we've gone up, other agencies have gone down. I've heard them complain. This year we got caught up in the downside by the 100,000. So, and that's the problem. We do our budgets and we made the decision to keep those grants the same because we thought they were safe, but we do our budget presentation, we always say there's a risk around government grants because the contracts aren't signed. The government year goes to the end of March. So they're always coming in after the fact with the exact amount of those grants. So it is always a budget risk for sure. I don't know if that answers your question. But
it does, thank you.
It did catch us off guard, that's for sure.
The concern is ongoing that money won't be there year after year, which of course accumulate in a deficit. But has there been, and this goes to everyone, I guess, Has there been any talk from the province or the federal government of this? Because we can't be the only police force that's being affected by this. Has anyone heard anything about any kind of assistance due to COVID-19 and the?
I know that the city has put applications in through, well, obviously the different levels of government funding and so forth for different initiatives that have happened. I haven't heard anything about funding for the PPE supplies. I do know, though, that we have received some PPE supplies through the government that did not cost us. It hasn't been a lot, but it has been some. So they've been divvying that up throughout the province to give each agency some of the PPEs. I don't know if there's additional money there. I know there was correct me if I'm wrong on this, John and Donna, there's a provincial side of the grant that is still out there that we haven't heard whether we're getting anything from that. We've got the local side that we had the 3 years for, but it's that reduction for 25%. I thought we had a grant that's outstanding there that we've partnered with Barry on, that we're sort of waiting to see whether we get that amount.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's heard yet.
No, we haven't heard yet, and so that's still outstanding. We don't know if we're going to get it. So I just wanted to make sure that that is on the table. We had made an application for it for 2 years, not 3 years, and we were hoping to be able to then get some of that money, that grant money.
The 75% is guaranteed for the next 2 or 3 years, I believe. So we're certain on that. And again, the province took a part of that 25% they took away, and you can apply for it, or any agency can apply for it. And if you're lucky, you can get some. So it's out there.
The other thing too is when you're looking at sort of the way moving forward, some of the lessons learned and how we're doing business through the judicial system, through policing, all those kinds of things. I mean, there's a lot of changes in the way court appearances are happening now, lots of video remands, lots of video. And so it may change the way transportation, the flow of transportation goes. There may be some benefits that come out of this as well too. So as we're working online or moving forward, we're all working together as a group on this to see where are we and we're not going to go back to the way we were. And so we've made some advances in efficiencies. So this will be interesting to see what we keep on this as part of the judicial process.
Any other questions for John on the budget? I don't see any. Thank you very much, John. It's nice to talk to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Next report is a summary of activities of the Kingston Police Community Volunteers.
Yes, I'll cover that off. Everyone has a copy of it, so I won't go through it line by line. It's nice to highlight the fabulous work of our around 50 community volunteers. It fluctuates a little bit, but we operate generally around 50. And this is part of a ministry guideline that covers the use of volunteers, and of course the Police Services Board Policy 4.7.6 of the manual. It covers off specifically their activities and their training. For new board members, they act as the eyes and ears of the Kingston Police. It's a non-confrontational role, more of an ambassador type role for us. And although they do assist us in picking up bikes that end up being stolen, and they certainly have helped in the past with locating stolen vehicles. If you turn to page 2 of the report, you'll see that we had 1,914.5 volunteer hours, but that was at events themselves, and over 6,000 person hours by the community volunteers. So if you look at the budget numbers with that of $20,779, and then of course the bike auction proceeds of $6,735, you're looking at roughly $28,000 for $2,000 worth of community presence by the police. They assist with many community events. Unfortunately, we won't have as many downtown as we normally do. But I think the value that they bring to the Kingston Police as ambassadors, they assist with tourists coming in. And on the bottom of page 2, you'll see there's everything from Meals on Wheels to parades to They're doing bike auction moves. They help with many of the festivals and many of the parades. So the value that they bring to the Kingston Police and the support they give the Kingston Police, I cannot overstate. Certainly, you'll see the lion's share of the fees come from covering uniforms, because as ambassadors, we want to make sure that they represent the Kingston Police and the community well. So that's where the lion's share of the funding goes towards that. And certainly I can entertain any questions. You have the full report there, but I just think it's important that we highlight that they remain compliant with the board policy and Kingston Police policies, and they're out there on a regular basis. Unfortunately, due to COVID and for the safety of the volunteers, they're not active at this point in time. But as things loosen up, we're looking forward to them getting back out there and be visible in the downtown core.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have such a group of dedicated volunteers. They give a lot back to the police and to our community. Any questions from anybody about the report? Okay, thanks, Chris. Notification from the Ministry of the Solicitor General, just letting us know that they have approved 2 special constable reappointments, Mark Badger and Julie Toll.
Yep. And they are appointed, let's see, just checking the date for how long that is. They're appointed for work under the Highway Traffic Act in terms of when road closures occur, and effective as of April 29th, 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so Andrea, I need a motion. The board needs to reappoint each time.
Oh,
That's one of the functions, yeah.
Sorry, they're in effect until 28th of April 25, small print there, so for 5 years.
okay. That sort of rang a bell that you needed a motion, but I figured you would tell me. So can I have that motion? Moved by Brian, seconded by Christian. All in favor? Put your hand up. Thank you. Memo from Angie about our collision reporting center.
Yes,
Want to
so
speak to that?
it's up for renewal for contract. So this is really just letting you know that we have the next 5-year term is till September 30th, 2025. And it provides for annual CPI increases to the annual fee. And so the agreement is just needed to be revisited, will be revisited again in 2025.
Christian?
So can you, or John or the chief, fill us in on what exactly the arrangement is? Because this is essentially, as far as I understand, a private service provider. It's an aggregate of the insurance companies that provide this service, and that appears to be paying no rent, if I understand this correctly, to Kingston Police Services for the facilities. They're simply paying the cost, but maybe that's a misunderstanding. They're simply paying the cost of the services that they use in terms of electricity, utilities, and so forth. So that would suggest that we're effectively subsidizing a private company, or is this a misinterpretation of the circumstances?
They have an entire software program that they're utilizing. So they will utilize all their, they have the, so when the collision reporting center, when people report to the collision reporting center, they have those reports, but when actually the police attend and file reports, they take all those reports and put them into their software system, and we're able to get a lot of analytics out of that. So they work with us in terms of analytics, which is a big component. They're also working, and that doesn't cost us anything. And they're working with us in terms of getting electronic versions of accident reports so that there's a lot of electronic submissions. So that's the next phase that we're working on together. And so it's a real, I guess, symbiotic relationship here where there's lots of good value that we get from the collision reporting center, and it reduces the amount of course, officer time on the basically half the collisions are done through the collision reporting center. So it really helps us in that sense too. But the analytics are huge, and that whole investment into the electronic submissions of reports and being populated are very helpful for us.
Yeah, I'll get back to you in a second, Christian. But I can say The reason why we brought the Collision Reporting Center in was primarily to reduce sworn officer time. Because before we had a Collision Reporting Center, we had a lot of expensive officer time tied up in collision reporting, and they would go to the scene, they'd have to fill out all the paperwork, et cetera, et cetera. And so the main driver behind bringing the Collision Reporting Center in at that point in time was to offload those responsibilities so that we could deploy officers in different ways. And the secondary reason was as a result of the data that the Collision Reporting Center can generate for us. So just to give you some context as to why the decision was made to bring them in the first place. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I understand the context, but it's also my understanding that not all police services offer that service, and that there are municipalities where the Collision Reporting Center essentially is in a commercial facility and has to pay rent. So I'm just trying to understand whether the arrangement that we have in particular for cities our size, whether this is a common arrangement or whether we are a bit of an anomaly in terms of providing. So I see the benefits, of course, of providing the service in-house, which doesn't obviate that my understanding is in other municipalities, commercial rent is being paid, although I'm not sure whether that's the case in terms of arrangements where it is co-located with police services.
I think you'll see both arrangements happening. Not every police agency has the room like that to have it, you know, and it works both ways where, you know, they can report to the police, or police are there if we need to do some extra checks. If there's been injuries or there's been something, an anomaly, we're right there to be able to address it at the time. So there's some benefits of having it in-house as well.
But there are other police services our size that do not have that arrangement, and where the service provider would simply be paying commercial rent. Is that correct?
That's correct. There are other arrangements where they're not co-located within the organization like they have it here. But it's not unusual that it's this way, but there are others that have it different for sure.
I'm just thinking like about budget discussion. This is perhaps a conversation to be had, and perhaps some research to be done on what other arrangements are, in particular where the service is co-located, and whether the service is provided rent-free by other municipal police services, or whether there's perhaps a different type of arrangement that might be more appropriate in terms of the facilities that are being provided.
Yes, that would be if the information that they're gathering, how much is it worth to them to charge them a rent or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. And I guess the other issue would be what is the charge, right? So I'm going to assume that a Collision Reporting Center located elsewhere where they have to pay rent are going to be charging the police a higher rate compared to a Collision Reporting Center that's in the police building and they're not charging rent. So I think you would need to look at each context and also the dollar figures in order to be able to make that comparison. Any other questions about this? Okay. We have another memo.
Sorry. So I guess the question is, at this point, we would have to have a motion to extend to give notice.
To
If we want-
extend for an additional 5-year term.
Yes. Yes, we have to give notice. So we would need a motion to give, to actually give notice to the CRC.
True.
Does that entail also giving financial notice, or it's or can we reserve? Can we provide notice and reserve judgment on the financial conditions to be extended until the more comparative research is provided on alternate arrangements and the optimization of the current arrangement?
So I believe that the current agreement provides for a 5-year extension. So that would be to the end of September 2025. there can only be one further extension. So after September 30th, 2025, there would then be a new agreement negotiated. That would be the time to renegotiate the price and everything else. For the extension, the current agreement provides for an annual CPI increase. So John has calculated that the 2020 annual rate would be $2,026.60. And so that would be built into the 5-year extension.
But we have no obligation contractual obligation to extend at this point. So we're essentially providing the same conditions for the next 5 years without having conducted a comparative review as to the full cost assessment of the value added to Kingston Police and the taxpayer versus the compensation provided by the private service provider and the benefits to them.
Yes, although if we don't renew, then the current agreement lapses, and then we're negotiating a brand new agreement. And so the question would be, would we be worse off entering into negotiations for a brand new agreement than we would be if we stuck with the current agreement? Jared?
As you said, as why it was brought into practice and the way it is today, has the conversation ever been had, the savings from police services not having to deal with collisions?
As I mentioned, 50% of the collisions go directly through, generally speaking, on an annual basis, go through the collision reporting center, where we don't respond to the actual motor vehicle collisions. And the ones that we do respond to are the significant ones, where obviously charges are mandated and there's injuries and the vehicles are towed away. So those are the ones that we would be responding to.
But that would be no different if it was located offsite, for instance, or if the service provider was paying rent. So it seems that now it's not immediately material to the concern about whether the service should continue to exist essentially rent-free within public property.
Mm-hmm. I can explore this a little bit further, so and come back to you.
Brian?
Sorry, I think that was going to be my question, and then my suggestion is that if this isn't time sensitive, if we could defer it for a month, try to get some of that information, and then we could be in a better position to either extend or to look at other options like negotiate another agreement. So I'm happy to, if there's no problem, I'm happy to move a motion to defer if that's required to our next meeting or whatever timing Angie thinks would be appropriate.
So we have to give notice by June 30th. So Angie, do you have enough time between now? So we'd have to decide this at our June board meeting. Do you have enough time between now and our June board meeting to gather the information?
I'll make sure we have the time for that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to defer it till next month. Okay.
A seconder?
Sorry, you couldn't hear me. Okay. Jared seconded it. All in favor?
It didn't get lost. I want to make sure it didn't get lost in the process.
Pardon? I don't know. I didn't hear that. I'm going to carry on. Okay. Angie, the next memo is from you. You're asking for expanded authorization to issue CEWs. So by way of background, for those who weren't on the board, when CEWs began to be rolled out across the province, the board was very cautious about that. And so some forces some boards authorized some forces to go ahead and issue CEWs to every officer. We did not. We had a staged rollout because we wanted to have a better understanding of how they would be used, when they would be used, if there were adverse health effects, how they fit into the use of force model. There was also an expense associated with the hardware, but also the training. And so that's why we rolled them out more slowly to only certain identified categories of officers. That was back in, I guess, 2014, so going back some time. So we've now had several years of experience with this, and you have a request in front of you from the chief to be able to authorize all trained officers to use CEWs. Angie?
So the idea is that they wouldn't be assigned to each individual officer, but they would be in a pool, so we don't need as many, so the expense isn't there. And we have enough CEWs to be able to allow our frontline officers to have a CEW to take with them on the road from this pool. Officers have been trained, they're mandated to, if they're new officers that haven't been trained before, is 12 hours of training. And if their recertification, I think the recertification is 8 or 6 hours to be recertified. So all our frontline have been qualified. So the pool is available for them to take out and have each individual officer to have a CEW. We found, we've been tracking the times that when we didn't have a CEW at an occurrence, when we could have had one, and I think the benefits are now to the point where we need to have everybody on the front line having a CEW. We don't utilize them very often throughout a year, maybe 19 times in a year, whether it's pointing or just showing or utilizing it. We've tracked that over the years, over the past 3 years, looking at the amount of times it's been very well used. We have a good process in place that when it is utilized, that the person is really brought to the hospital, looked after medically first before they're brought here to the station. There have not been those adverse effects. I think it justifies, and we're able to utilize them for all our frontline officers.
Questions from anybody? Sorry. Is anybody then prepared to move the motion amending the board policy? Because this is one of the board has to authorize this, right? So this is section 4.7.12, use of force, which is a board policy. So is anybody prepared to move the motion to make the amendment that Angie is recommending? Christian, Jared, all in favor? Thank you. That brings us to the end of our public meeting. Motion to adjourn and move in camera. Brian, Christian, all in favor? Yes. Thank you.